Ronda Rousey, once a name that echoed through arenas and blared across television screens, had traded the roar of the crowd for the hum of a quieter life. No longer the fierce fighter dominating headlines with knockouts and endorsements, she now lived simply in a small apartment perched above a laundromat, where the faint scent of detergent drifted up through the floorboards. Her days were no longer measured by training camps or press conferences, but by routine walks, about a half mile or so, from a little Mediterranean cafe on Ninth Street, where the owner never charged her for extra hummus. It was a family-run spot with dim lighting and warm spices in the air, a place where no one cared about her past victories or the weight her name once carried. She savored this anonymity, this ordinariness, a stark contrast to the years when every move she made was watched, critiqued, and celebrated. Now her life was her own, a gym membership she rarely used, a dog she thought about adopting but hadn't committed to, and a weekly self-defense class she taught at the local community center. Not for the paycheck, but because it felt right to pass on a piece of the confidence she'd earned through years in the ring. On the night the story begins, she'd left the cafe just 10 minutes earlier, sipping mint tea and scrolling through old photos of coaches and teammates long faded from her world. Her sneakers moved softly over the uneven sidewalk, navigating cracks and tree roots, her pace steady but unhurried. About 15 minutes to home if she didn't stop to admire a fresh mural. This was Ronda now. No spotlight, no spectacle. Just a woman walking home, content in the stillness she'd carved out for herself. It was a warm summer night, the kind where the air clung softly to the skin, and Ronda Rousey was walking home alone, about a half mile from her favorite cafe, when the trouble began. She'd barely made it a few blocks when a police cruiser, white with blue decals, boxy and unmistakable, rolled up slowly behind her, its engine purring like a predator sizing up prey. Inside were three officers, their faces lit faintly by the dashboard glow. A young one with a shaved head smirking in the passenger seat, an older one chewing gum behind the wheel, and a third leaning forward from the back, grinning wide. At first it was just laughter, low and mocking, drifting out as they trailed her, keeping pace with her steady stride along the uneven sidewalk. Then came the taunts, sharp and personal. "You really walking around here alone this late?" one called, his voice dripping with amusement. They recognized her. "Aren't you that fighter chick who used to choke people out?" And the jabs grew bolder, cutting into her past fame with lines like, "Thought you were taller and kinda normal now, huh?" Rhonda kept walking, her breathing even, her fists relaxed, but the cruiser hugged the curb, its tires crunching gravel just a few feet behind. The tension thickened when the passenger stepped out, closing the door softly, deliberately, and fell into step beside her. His half-smile twisted as he murmured, "What's it like, being famous and forgotten?" A jab meant to sting. Then in a quick, intentional flick, he lifted the hem of her dress, exposing the back of her thighs for a fleeting second. The laughter from the car erupted, harsh and loud, splitting the quiet night as the horn blared twice, egging him on. They thought it was a game, a joke shielded by their badges in the empty street. No cameras, no witnesses near the darkened elementary school. These weren't random hecklers or barroom drunks. They were men with authority, weapons, and the arrogance of untouchability, assuming a lone woman on a late-night walk was theirs to toy with. Rhonda's silence didn't falter, but something in her shifted. A line crossed under the flickering streetlights they'd never see coming. The night had turned against Ronda Rousey as she walked her familiar half-mile route home. The police cruiser's engine humming a few feet behind her, its occupants reveling in their taunts and laughter. The moment one officer stepped out and flicked the hem of her dress, exposing her thighs in a fleeting, humiliating gesture, the air crackled with expectation. They wanted a reaction, a gasp, a shout, a sprint into the shadows of the quiet street near the elementary school. But Rhonda didn't give it to them. She stopped dead in her tracks, her sneakers planted on the cracked sidewalk, shoulders squared, arms loose at her sides. The man who'd touched her grinned, stepping back half a pace, waiting for her to crack under the weight of their amusement. Instead, she turned slowly, deliberately, her eyes locking onto his with a focus honed by years in the ring. A piercing calm that stripped away his smirk in seconds. The laughter from the cruiser faltered. The horn's echo faded into the rustling leaves overhead. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, her silence heavier than any threat they could muster. The officer's swagger drained, his posture stiffening as if he'd misjudged the game entirely. "Keep walking," came a voice from the car, uneasy now. But Ronda stepped forward, past him, as if he were invisible. The tension lingered, and later, when they tried again, trailing her down a darker stretch, one reaching for her bag, her response was swift and surgical. Her right hand snapped up, fingers clamping his wrist in a twist so precise it bent his arm unnaturally, forcing him off balance. Pivoting, her elbow struck the second officer under the ribs, a sharp, controlled blow that sent him stumbling. In under 3 seconds, it was over. No wild swings, no chaos, just the discipline of a fighter who knew exactly how to move. The third officer froze, hand hovering near his gun, but not daring to draw, his bravado replaced by uncertainty. Ronda stepped back, meeting their gazes one by one, her breath steady, her presence unshaken. They'd crossed a line expecting weakness. Instead, her calm resistance, a blend of stillness and sudden precision, shattered their illusion of control, leaving them rattled under the dim streetlights. The night Ronda Rousey faced down 3 officers faded into a quiet dawn, but the echoes of her stand didn't stop at the empty street corner a half-mile from her cafe. Back at the precinct, the air shifted. Subtle at first, like a breeze through an open window, but undeniable. The 3 men who trailed her in their cruiser returned the next morning, their usual swagger muted. The youngest, Tom Delaney, stared at his tablet, barely speaking. The oldest, who'd driven, skipped his sarcastic quips. The one who'd lifted her skirt sat silent, his laughter gone. Other officers noticed. Precincts are like small towns, where every twitch and routine gets felt. Marissa Nguyen, an admin staffer with years of watching egos, caught their tense whispers in the break room. "She didn't even say anything," one muttered, followed by a curse and a chair scrape. She jotted it down, unofficial but sharp-eyed. By noon, a junior investigator, Todd Weaver, found an anonymous tip in the internal system. "Watch Patrol Unit 42C. Something happened last night." He dug into the shift logs. No reports, no arrests, just a 2-hour gap of GPS tracking near an elementary school at midnight. That flagged file sparked whispers. A missing body cam segment. A strange call overheard in dispatch. Rumors of that fighter woman from TV. Captain Dale Vickers, a blunt man who'd weathered shakeups, hauled the trio into his office. Their fidgeting, averted eyes, crossed arms, tapping feet, cracked when Delaney blurted, "I think we made a mistake." That confession hit like a stone in still water, rippling out fast. Internal affairs kicked in, collecting statements, pulling cruiser logs. Delaney later sat with investigators, spilling it all. The trailing, the taunts, the skirt flick, her silence that unnerved them, her swift moves when they pushed too far. By day's end, the 3 were on leave, the precinct buzzing with clipped voices and half-closed doors. Ronda stayed silent, sipping coffee at her cafe, but her stand had pierced the department's armor. What started as a late-night joke now threatened careers, exposing cracks in a system that rarely bent. Proof that one woman's refusal to shrink could unsettle a whole machine. Ronda Rousey didn't set out that warm summer night to fight a battle or reclaim her faded spotlight. She just wanted to walk home, a half-mile trek from the cafe on 9th, where the tea was minty and the hummus free. When the police cruiser rolled up, its 3 occupants mocking her past and flicking her skirt, it wasn't about fame or headlines for her. It was about something simpler, something fiercer, the right to exist unbothered, to move through the world without becoming someone else's plaything. She'd lived that before, crowds chanting her name, cameras in her face. But now in her small apartment above the laundromat, she'd carved out a quiet space, a life measured in steady steps over cracked sidewalks. Not applause. When the officer's hand darted out, exposing her thighs to their laughter, she didn't shout or run. She stopped, turned, and met their eyes with a stillness that cut deeper than words, her silence a wall they couldn't breach. Later, when they pushed again, reaching for her bag, her swift twist of a wrist and sharp elbow strike weren't for show. They were a line drawn, a boundary reclaimed in under 3 seconds. Rhonda didn't call internal affairs when they left a voicemail days later, voice calm and asking for her side. She listened twice, then deleted it, not out of apathy, but because she'd already spoken through her actions, her refusal to shrink under their badges. She didn't want a podium or a victim's label. She wanted what she'd always fought for: room to breathe, to walk her route without being handled. The precinct scrambled. Investigations, suspensions, whispers. But Rhonda kept her routine, sipping tea at the cafe, running her usual paths, her hoodie up when reporters lurked. Her stand wasn't loud, but it forced a shift, making them see her not as a story or a has-been, but as a person who'd claimed her dignity footstep by footstep. Under the flickering streetlights, past the elementary school shadows, she'd taken back her space, not for justice or fame, but for the quiet certainty that no one could take it again unless she let them. The night Ronda Rousey walked away from the police cruiser, her shadow stretching long under the moonlight, about a half-mile from home, the story didn't end. It hung in the air, unresolved, like the faint hum of a streetlight flickering over the empty sidewalk. The officers had retreated, their laughter silenced by her calm defiance, but the tension didn't dissolve. It coiled tighter, a thread pulled taut across the city. Back at the precinct, the fallout brewed slowly. Tom Delaney's confession to Internal Affairs, the GPS log showing their cruiser's aimless path near the elementary school, the 3 suspensions. But it wasn't a neat conclusion. The youngest officer stepped back, citing mental health leave, while the others lawyered up, their silence a shield against the creeping investigation. Rhonda saw the cruiser again days later, parked across from her cafe on 9th. Different faces inside, but eyes still watching. A quiet reminder that one encounter wasn't the end. She sipped her coffee, unbothered on the surface, and walked past without a glance, her routine unbroken. Yet the city felt different, not worse, just heavier, as whispers turned into a local headline. Police officers under review after allegations of misconduct involving former athlete. Her name stayed out of it, but people knew, connecting dots from grainy news feeds to barroom chatter. She didn't answer the calls, old teammates, journalists, opting for a run instead, her sneakers pounding the same route where it all happened. The precinct braced for more. Sensitivity training memos, Captain Vickers' closed door, a fractured sense of invincibility. A civilian from the station approached her one evening, tired eyes saying, "They're scared, not of getting caught, but of what's next." She nodded. "That makes 2 of us." Her voice steady but aware of the unknown ahead. The broader impact wasn't loud, no protests, no viral storm, but it simmered in locker rooms, break rooms, late-night bars where off-duty cops debated loyalty and policy in hushed tones. Rhonda didn't want the spotlight. She kept walking past the replaced streetlight, the bare trees, reclaiming her space. But that night's ripple had grown into a wave, unresolved and potent, hinting that her stand, quiet as it was, might yet reshape more than one dark street. Ronda Rousey's story carries lessons that resonate deeply as we age. Strength isn't always loud, and dignity is worth defending, no matter the years behind us. For those over 50 who've weathered life's storms, raising families, facing loss, or navigating change, her calm stand against harassment reminds us that we don't need to shout to be heard. Silence paired with resolve can shift power, whether it's dealing with overbearing neighbors or standing firm in a doctor's office. Rhonda's refusal to shrink under pressure teaches that personal space, be it a quiet walk or a corner of our home, is sacred, a right we've earned through decades of living. Her actions also show that small choices ripple outward. Saying no to disrespect can inspire others, even late in life. For seniors, this might mean mentoring a grandchild or speaking up at a community meeting. Quiet courage still sparks change. Finally, the unresolved tension in her tale mirrors our own. Not every fight ends with fanfare, but holding our ground keeps us whole. At this age, it's less about winning big and more about living true, steady, unbroken, and free.